Thank you so much, Kate. I think that's a great slide showing, what is it, 23 students there who you've directly influenced, and they will go on to influence some number each more, and you're like the beginning of a cascade yourself. This is fantastic. Now, to keep up with our list of sort of tips to support gender equity, I've been offered some suggestions on forging women's advancement, about deciding to buy from companies that support women, to build conductive, flexible work environments. I know that's very important, that when if we were in a society where everybody supported the family equally, then this would not be a women's issue, this would be a people issue, but we're not in that society that we might hope for, and so it becomes increasingly impactful on women to have rigid work environments that don't support families. I wish it were otherwise. So having flexibility in the workplace is very important. We always have to keep our eyes on gender parity gaps. It's my pleasure to invite Joanne Atlee up, our final speaker. Now, we have, as I said, a priority in the Faculty of Mathematics for women in computer science and women in mathematics. And Jo has served as director for our Women in Computer Science initiative. Jo is a professor in the David R. Cheriton School of Computer Science at Waterloo. And she's the founding director of the Software Engineering program. Her research interests include software requirements and software modeling, automated analysis of software models, modular software development, and the detection and resolution of feature interactions. Applied telephony and automotive software is one particular area. She will be general chair of the 41st International Conference on Software Engineering. For those who are working in software engineering, you know that ICSE is a big deal. Okay. She served as program chair for the 31st International Conference and program chair for the 13th IEEE Requirements Engineering Conference, RE05. So Jo's been in this business for quite some time and is a prominent figure in the field. Jo has served as the ACM SIGSOFT on the ACM SIGSOFT Executive Committee as an at-large member and as a member of the International Federation for Information Processing Working Group 2.9 on Software Requirements Engineering. She serves on the editorial boards of the IEEE Transactions on Software Engineering, Software and Systems Modeling, and Requirements Engineering, the Requirements Engineering Journal. Now you might think that would be enough to keep anyone busy 24/7, but she's also co-author with Shari Lawrence Pfleeger on the textbook Software Engineering, Theory and Practice. Jo is an ACM Distinguished Scientist. Jo, welcome.
Thank you for the introduction. And a little tidbit about, oops, I'm going to get this in mistake. That next ICSE conference is in Montreal, I'm happy to report. And I'm looking for sponsors. So whenever anyone hears that I'm Director of Women in Computer Science, they want to know the stats. And so I thought I would talk a little bit about sort of what the state is of women in tech these days and what we're doing at the University of Waterloo for women in computer science. So one thing that people tend to forget, and it's mainly because this is before almost all of our time, is that the early programmers were mostly women, right? And so we go on and on about, Ada Lovelace being the first woman, but in fact, like almost all of the early women, all of the early programmers were women, right? So men built the hardware, and women wrote the code, where writing the code meant plugging cables, and if you can imagine trying to plug cables in to wire a function, good luck. So most of the code breakers in World War II were women, Most of the early programmers at NASA were women, by putting John Glenn into orbit and back home again. Women helped put men on the moon. So what happened? Right, so the very earliest programmers did not have degrees in CS, right? They had degrees in math and physics and business. And they sort of stumbled their way into computer science. But then they were role models for women going into computer science. And so what you see in the red graph, at the very beginning, there was a fairly steep increase in representation of women in computing, up until about the mid-1980s. And then it started to crash. And people always wonder, well, why did it crash? Well, the most well thought of reason for this was actually the advent of the PC. So for those of you, you don't need to raise your hand, for those of you who did your undergraduate degree before 1985, when we went to university, nobody had, very few people had any computing experience when they first got there, right? And we all kind of took our first computer class just to see what it was, and people either liked it or they didn't, and people who liked it stayed in. After the PC, we had, keeping in mind that the PC tended to be marketed to boys, marketed to microelectronics hobbyists, which tended to be men. A lot of the early software tended to be directed to boys and men. So and there weren't very many PCs around, right? And so they were fairly scarce, and the boys tended to dominate their use. And so what you found was that, like after 1985, students who came into university, the guys on average had more experience than the women. And so even before your university studies even started, they felt behind. And so a lot of technically inclined women tended to go to other fields where they could still be strong technically, but where they felt that the playing field was a little more level. So I did my degree in 1985, and the percentage of women at that time was about 35%, 40%. We didn't really think about it. We looked 50-50, as far as you could tell. Went to graduate school, graduated sort of at Waterloo in 1992. And if you ever wondered what professors do during midterms and exams while you're writing exams, well, one of the things that I used to do is I would count the women. And I would teach core courses. I pretty much only ever taught core courses in CS. So I felt like, okay, I'm seeing women who are enrolled as a major in CS. Pretty much every single time, 10%. Right? Huge drop. So if you had a low representation of women in university for a bit, it's going to have an effect on the representation in the tech field. It is interesting that it is wildly different from company to company, depending on the size of the company, depending on what the company is doing, depending on the culture in the company. So you see numbers ranging from 40% to 3%. But overall, it's about less than 20%. One of the things that Stephen Watt kind of said was when he travels the world, in many of the other countries, the numbers are very different. And he's right. Right. So here again, I think these numbers are from, I can't tell. I think these numbers are from 2015. The numbers are wildly different in different countries. Right. The very end, at the top of the line, 60% of and this is the statistics of women who are studying CS in university. 60%. And so it tends again to be sort of, well, what are the biases about women in those countries, and what are the biases about what computing is in those countries. So in the countries where a lot of they have a high representation of women, the perception of computing is that it's detail-oriented, it's boring, it's women's work. Oops. So at Waterloo, I'm happy, like, it doesn't sound like a happy message, but I'm actually happy to say that our enrollment is going up for the last 3 years. The intake has been about 25% of the entry class has been women. And even better, the percentage of women in the cohort of students who transfer into CS from other programs is even higher. Right? So we get a lot of our transfer students because they enroll in math. They know math from high school, they're good at math, they don't know what they're going to do, but they're good at math, so they enroll in math. We force them to take computer science in first year. They dread it because they don't know what they're getting into, and they're worried about that everybody else has experience that they don't have. But they're good at it, and they like it, and so they transfer into CS. So overall, right now, the percentage of women in our program is about 22%. So not where we would like it to be. Right, we would like it to be back up to 40%, which seems at least more of a normal representation, if not 50%. But it is twice as high as it was when I arrived. So we're celebrating, but our job's not done. So probably the two biggest challenges that we face are one, there is still an experience gap between the male and female students who enter universities. And that instills a self-confidence gap in the students. So just because the guys, like computers for sure are now much more ubiquitous, right? So it's not the case that women have less access to computers, but the guys are more likely to have been enrolled in computer camps growing up. They're more likely to have participated in robotic contests. They're more likely to have enrolled in high school courses. So it is still the case that they, on average, the guys have a little more experience with computing. Fortunately, CS curriculum has changed a lot over the years, and the pre-experience that students come in with tends not to correlate well with what we actually want them to know in university studies. So this pre-experience doesn't actually play a big role in whether they can be successful in the major. So I tend to equate it with learning an instrument. If you've ever had to learn an instrument, so there's a big difference between picking up a guitar and having a chord sheet in front of you and playing chords and learning songs, versus actually learning how to play the instrument and the theory behind it and scales. And so the kind of pre-university experience that students come in with tend to be more along the lines of learning how to play songs, right? They participate in some contests. They've done some weekend experiences, week-long experiences, and that makes them more comfortable with the guitar, but doesn't necessarily make them better at playing the guitar. And so the girls catch up, right? Despite the experience gap, they catch up in first year. Their GPA is exactly the same as the guys. But the experience gap does does instill this self-confidence gap. So the students who come in with computing experience are a little overconfident in their abilities, and the students who have no experience are very have a low confidence in their abilities. So what is WICS trying to do? WICS tries to help with this self-confidence gap and to also help students with some of the biases and obstacles that they're likely to face as a woman in tech, right? Some of the cultural issues. So everyone always kind of wonders, there's a little bit of a backlash against WICS, right? The female students are getting special treatment, whereas we kind of see it as, well, no, we're trying to help them recover from some of the negative special treatment that they sometimes experience. So what we really try to do is work on the biases and help them address some of the issues that they might see in the workplace. We run a lot of events, so I'm just going to talk about a few of them. We run a big orientation at the beginning of the year, tell them what computing is likely to be like, show them where the labs are so they can feel very comfortable. We talk about what it's like to be a woman in tech. We run practice sessions for technical interviews so that they can get used to speaking out loud in a technical interview session. We run a sexism response workshop, which sort of gives them an idea of really good comebacks for comments that they might hear, instead of kind of thinking about them 24 hours later. Oh, I wish I had said that singer. We send large numbers of students to Grace Hopper and to CanCWIC, which is the conference that we're attending, that we're here for this weekend. So you can't imagine what these girls' takeaway is, right? They come from situations, from high school, from university, from their co-op experience where they're in a minority, and they're questioning whether they belong. We send them to a conference where there's 18,000 technical women, and they see that the technical women all look different, they all think different, there is no culture of CS that someone has to fit into. Right? They can be themselves and be in computer science. And so they come back from that conference feeling much more committed to the degree and much more feeling like they belong in the degree. This is one of my favorite quotes. If you could just kind of minus how it was repurposed last year. So this is a quote from Madeleine Albright when she was a U.S. ambassador to the UN, and there were only 6 of them, only 6 women who were ambassadors to the UN at the time, and talking about that they needed to work with each other, needed to help each other kind of overcome the biases that they were seeing at the UN. So I'd like to convince the students that Wix is always there, right? That one of the things that they really need to be doing is to build a technical network of girlfriends, that they shouldn't be trying to fight the fight by themselves. Wix is there to kind of help fight the fight with them. CanCWIC, which we're all here for this weekend, again, is sort of an activist network to help fight the fight. And I guess we are appealing to the alumni as well to help fight the fight. Thank you. So I'm going to try to play a video. So Wix celebrates a 10-year anniversary this year, and we created a video from some of our students talking about the experiences of being a woman in tech and the importance of other women in tech. Sound.
Oh, you got that job because you're a girl.
You look too pretty to be in tech. Of course they'll admit you because you're a girl. No one hires female engineers. It's not a good career for you.
That company is really good at diversity hires. In my family, my generation is only women, so there was never any pushback as to what I could do. When I was in my high school computer classes, there was only one girl other than myself. There was actually a co-op term where there were more bathroom stalls for women than there were actually women in the office. When it came time to pick something for university, I actually fell in love with the coding and the programming side of it. I had fallen into the perfect industry for me. I found very early on in my undergrad, I had been made to feel like I was the only woman at the table. And the people who were loudest made me feel like I shouldn't be here. For the first time, I really felt what it was like to be alone. It wasn't until I actually was on a team with a woman and the experience was so drastically different. In that moment, I felt my demeanor shift. I felt that I didn't have to be constantly defending the right of women to be in the tech industry. I was able to be myself regardless of what I was supposed to represent. The best part actually was that I had people come to my defense. Seeing everyone have my back made me feel more accepted.
It's really hard to pursue a field in cybersecurity when you don't see yourself represented in the field.
The fact of seeing women in the computing industry around me is knowing that I have a career path to follow.
It's important to seek out allies of women in computing.
Being able to have other women around you who listen to what you say and are able to immediately say, I understand, and that happened to me, and this is what I did, that's like hugely helpful.
That's an amazing video. For those who haven't been back to campus in a while, those were various vistas that you can see across the campus. The place has changed. Boy, are we ever lucky to have Jo as the leader for women in computer science. This has to be the most lucid presentation on the subject I have ever heard. So thank you very much, Jo. So it's getting time is getting on, right now I'd like to sort of address our final challenge. We've reached a certain stage, but we really need to go further in presenting opportunities to women in their education, the Faculty of Mathematics, and in computer science at the University of Waterloo. We had a couple of examples earlier about people who had funded scholarships that have supported women in studying at the university. And of course, in an event like this, we reach out to alumni, we reach out to alumni to think about how they've been helped, you have been, in your career at the university, and to think about the people who've been with you and how they've been helped, and what opportunities some people might have missed. And if you've been helped, perhaps you can help someone else at the next stage. Can we, each person here, as we've said earlier, is like the beginning of a cascade. And so if you feel inclined, you'd very much welcome for anybody here or for any of your friends or any of your colleagues to support an existing scholarship for women in computer science or for women in mathematics, or perhaps even to start a scholarship on your own. This is incredibly important to make this field accessible to the next generation and to pay this forward. And we value the diversity in educational outcomes. There are a lot of phrases that sound really trite when you've got a guy standing up here and saying them, but they're really important. And it's not important just for people who happen to be running the university, it's important for the next generation of students. Before we say goodbye, I think that we really should express our appreciation again for today's fabulous set of speakers. We're so lucky at Waterloo to have representatives like Vicki, Kate, and Jo here to be able to carry this banner. So thank you very much. I'd like to extend a few thank yous to people who've helped us make this evening a success. Firstly, to our friends at Espace CDPQ. So thank you very much. We've got Manon Lefebvre, Valérie Audrey, and Michel Floyd, and our friends from White Star Capital who helped make this, bring this evening to you. So we've got, so thank you very much. We've got Lynn Masterman, Jean-François Marcoux. Where is Jean-François? There he is in the back, sitting there taking it all in. Christophe Bork. Is Christophe here? Oh, Christophe, welcome. And a special nod to Sanjay Zimmerman. Sanjay, okay, thank you for coming out this evening. So thank you very much for everything. Now, we've got 2 door prizes. Does anybody remember the geese on campus? Well, we've got some stuffed geese out there. They're a lot more sanitary than the geese that you know as students. So 2 lucky winners will find special envelope under your seat. Please check under your seat. It's quite polite to do so. All right, so Lylan will bring door prizes to our guests. So with that, this concludes the presentations for this evening. All right, so does anybody have an envelope to show? I see one. Okay. Wonderful. Now, where is the second one? There may be a chair that is not occupied.
We'll find it, we'll play a little game.
All right.
Enjoy dessert and we'll select one for you.
Okay, thank you for coming.